Look outside, Tyler. What do you see?
Blinds?
Through them. Look through the blinds. What do you see?
Snow.
Well, isn't
Cars?
that right? And how do you... No, snow is right. And what do you think about the snow?
Jon Snow.
Right. And Jon Snow relates to this episode because...
Gusts of wind and snow.
I was thinking John and John, but let's go with gust of wind and gust of snow. Here we are, episode
it's sending it far.
46.
John, gust of far snow.
Episode 46 with John Guastaferro. Great episode. We dove into... Again, we started diving into the topic of crafting an effect, but instead we were talking about your identity and your goals and marketing. And I think that's very revealing about what it's like to craft an effect. You have to know quite a bit about yourself. So no more further ado. Here it is, episode of 46 with John Guastaferro. Here it is.
Enjoy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah.
My name is Tyler.
And we are here with an awesome magician. And I think the first time that we're interviewing a magician whose book I've read and been a fan of, which is pretty crazy. And he is coming out with a new book that is launching very, very soon. And I'm very excited to hear all about it. Here he is, John Guastaferro. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you two guys?
We're doing really well.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a snowy day here in Toronto. And
it's a sunny day here in California.
Well, for us, the indoor days are good. They're days for magic and theory, and that's what the winter time is.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's when we hibernate and work on our card skills.
I get it. We all need that.
Yeah.
So we start every episode by diving in and finding out how each person got into magic. So how did you get into magic?
Oh man, you know what? I remember when I was younger, Doug Henning had these TV specials. Do you know who Doug Henning is?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, right. That dude with the long hair and everything, and is kind of quirky but really fun. But anyway, I guess I liked magic as a kid, but I think it's when he did a very simple close-up trick on TV. He just closed his hand around a nickel, opened it up, and it was gone. I believe it was a John Cornelius idea that how he did it, but I was absolutely captivated beyond all the other stage stuff. This is what really captured me. So I think that was kind of the launching pad into, okay, wow, I like magic, but I love magic. And I think as Joshua J. put it, there's a point where every kid who loves magic becomes a student of magic. Not every kid, but those who want to go in deeper, they become a student of magic. And that's when they go beyond just buying tricks at the magic shop. They actually buy books and they learn about theory. So I'd say it was around the age of around 6 or 7 that I got into magic. But I'll add that I think professionally, I mean, actually doing paid gigs for probably the past 25 years. So
Wow. And how early were you sort of captivated by that study aspect of magic? Like, how soon did you, because you were mentioning, you know, that twist into being a student. How
Sure.
long was it from that interest until you sort of went on, you know, let's call it the offense of your magic?
Well, not much long after that. But I mainly got books that you could actually find at the bookstore. So in my case, it was like Walden Books and eventually Barnes and Noble. Like there's those books that are kind of
you were at
for the
bookstores, not
masses.
at magic shops, right?
Yeah, but you could still buy like the Dover books or the the Gene Hugger books, and it's like wow, like so I think at an early age, I'd say around 7 or 8. But then I guess like a lot of magicians, when L&L started coming out with before L&L, it's when Stars of Magic started coming out with their videotapes. And I got the Paul Harris early videotapes, which was absolutely incredible. And that's what really got me. And I honestly, I forgot. That was probably in the early 90s that I started learning that way as well. And then just adding to my both my book and my VHS and certainly now DVD library, but mainly in the books now.
It's really crazy, on two different sides of the spectrum. That's something that just popped up to me. The first is that we hear so many people talk about the same key figures who shaped their magic, like Doug Henning, Paul Harris, like those are names that have come up so many times on the podcast of people saying that those were really like turning points for them in their magic. And also on the other end, you mentioned like adding to the library and all those different things. So it's interesting because we're each sort of crafted by the couple of magicians that we latch onto that form our sort of basic interest in the field. And it's interesting to hear that these are both, powerhouse close-up guys, and it shows a lot because I know that you're producing some really, really crazy magic. So it's awesome to see how a lot of people have similar inspirations and a lot of people have very different inspirations, and they're broad. And it's awesome that you dove into mentioning the world of video, because there's a lot of old guys with their arms crossed talking about the only good world is the world of books, and obviously we're both fans of books, but it's hard to discount the world of video, It's
well, it's true. Learn. It's a new day we're in now with YouTube, and I mean everything has its ups and downs. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's just what you do with the information, I think as magician, and I talk a lot about this in my books and everything, but there's a point where you have to decide as a magician, why is it that you like certain tricks or routines, and some of them you say, that's good, but that's not going on my repertoire. I think it's a good reason. It's a good opportunity to ask why, and that helps you shape kind of your priorities in magic. So it's garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. So you're exposed to all these different ways to learn magic and see magic, and a lot of it's been good for magic. So yeah, VHS tapes for learning magic, certainly David Blaine's special on TV for just bringing magic to a kind of looking at a different way, like looking at it through the lens of the audience, not the performer. And it's a lot of there's a spectrum of ways that magic continues to stay alive in our world, but I think the foundation of learning magic hasn't changed much. Books are certainly the foundation, but there's other ways to add. It's certainly lectures as well, seeing it live and online lecture. I can go on. You get it.
But it's great because things like online lectures, like it's a beautiful example of something that is actually bringing us closer together. A lot of people are speaking very negatively about it. They're like, where are the magic communities now? Like when I was a kid, like we would meet every Tuesday in the back of the pizza shop, and we would, and this is, and like magicians complain about this sort of thing. Yet now there's people who are 15 years old who are signed up for Penguin live lectures, Murphy's live lectures, and other live lectures. They're consuming material and understanding magic at a rate that we've never seen before. Yeah. And I'm all for it. Obviously I think books are great for reasons why they are, and videos are great for reasons why they are. And I think I'm excited about magic evolving and learning and teaching and expressing magic totally evolving.
Yeah, I think that like a lot of people don't understand how inaccessible magic is for certain people. Like I grew up, 25-minute commute from the magic shop, and I was blessed with that. But like there's a lot of people like Michael John, like he didn't find magic until he was in his 30s, but like loved it. He didn't know a community until he was
never mind that. In this conversation right now, John just mentioned that he had to find his magic at a library.
Yeah, exactly.
How much different is it now that you can actually type something into Google or YouTube and find your way to the best magicians?
It's amazing. I mean, kind of in some ways I look back and wish I would have had that sort of accessibility, but at the time you have what you have and you just make the most of it. And for me in the early 90s, it was I became a member of the castle at 1995. So I'd go every Wednesday night, but it takes commitment. I mean, if you want to learn magic, you really know it's commitment, and you find the ways you want to connect. for me, I tell you, it's such an honor. Like I would read Richard Kaufman books and Stephen Minch books, but the fact that now I write for Genie Magazine. I write the Magicana column every month. The fact that me and Richard Kaufman go back and forth every day via email and Skype once in a while, it's like, oh my God, this is my hero. Now we're like talking. And the same with like Stephen Minch. We know each other pretty well, but I've never actually met him. So I think technology has brought us together. I have like an email kind of group with Minch and Jack Carpenter and John Bannon, and it's like, oh my God, like these are guys that I learned their books and never did I dream that I would like actually know them on a personal level, let alone exchange ideas and kind of session via email. And so yeah, you seek out opportunities.
And we're doing it right now.
That's exactly
right?
what I was going to say.
Now.
That's
Honestly,
exactly what, like, I'm blown away that I can speak to someone whose book I read, who like had an impact on my magic. Like, that's just incredible, like who could ever do that 20 years ago? You have to just hope that they come to your town to lecture and that you
manage to get
ingrained
5
enough
minutes with them.
right, that you're ingrained enough in the magic community in your town that you don't miss that opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, it's incredible for me to be on this end, talking to somebody who's read one of my books and is excited about it. It's really very fulfilling. So thank you.
That's awesome. So let's dive in. You mentioned this a couple of different times in the last little bit, which was finding yourself in magic, like putting a lot of work in. And I don't want to give away a lot of what is in 1 Degree, 'cause it's an awesome book, but I was just wondering if you could touch a little bit on what the Napkin Approach is, because I think that it's an awesome idea, and now more than ever, because it's so easy to consume magic, finding out who you are in your magic is wildly important. So just want to hear you chat a little bit about what that approach is and what it does.
Sure. Well, the Napkin Approach, this comes from my interest in business. By the way, I majored in business with a specialization in marketing.
Awesome.
Like, wow, 92. So I'm probably older than you think. But I've been doing marketing and advertising and on many fronts since that time in both the business and nonprofit sector. So and I've read I continue to read books on marketing and branding, and so that's another one of my loves. But I used to think that magic and my my career in marketing were completely separate. But over the past decade, I realized no, actually they're very, very connected. So my overarching vision in magic is to connect people to the extraordinary. And whether I do it through magic, or I help a nonprofit advance its cause, or I help build a brand, I'm helping to connect people to something extraordinary. So I've learned to blend those a little bit. But so anyway, that's kind of a little bit of background, because in 1 Degree, I think there's over 20 magic routines. There's also essays, and many of them do draw from experience in marketing and advertising over the past several decades. So Napkin Approach was just my way of helping you hone in on what is your brand. And a lot of people say, okay, I know a brand. A brand is a logo, right? No, a brand's not a logo. Like, what is a brand? There's many ways to define it. But I talk about it. I think one worthy definition of brand is it's a promise. And any good brand is very aware of what their promise is. It's why they exist, and it's how they know if they're successful. And it's something that they bring to life in everything they do, from how they speak to the magic in this case, the magic they present or the product they sell. But in magic, you are the product. So it's very important that you understand, okay, if you're a brand, what is that promise that you make in magic? And after every gig or after every connection, are you making that promise and fulfilling it in a continual way? So that's kind of the context of it. But the Napkin Approach is really a way to get focused. So if you were sitting at Starbucks with somebody and someone said, hey, so what is your brand in magic? Like, how might you articulate that on a napkin? Meaning, if you got a pen and just wrote it down, it kind of forces you to be a little spontaneous. It forces you to be focused, because what would you fit on a napkin? So
yeah, it has to fit.
Yeah, it's to fit. So then I again, not to give it all away, but I don't mind giving it away. So it's basically kind of guide you through identifying what are your top 3 things. And don't feel like you have to write a word. Maybe draw a picture, like what comes to mind. And so I help you hone in on 3 things, 3 priorities that define your brand. And then I ask you to flip the napkin over and let's dive a little bit more into those. What are some ways that you actually do those things? What are those things, maybe intentionally or even non-intentionally, that you do? And those help you kind of zone in on your your objectives and strategies. So I use a lot of business terms, but I do it kind of, I think, a fun way. And I've had people email me their napkin, which is like, wow, that's so cool. They did it.
That's awesome.
And even my own napkin, I actually share my own napkin in the book. And then but I think it's actually become refined, and that's okay. You know, a lot of brands, just think of a good brand that you like. I don't know if it's Starbucks or Apple or even a smaller brand, but you could see how brands have shifted over time. Like even Instagram, started off just kind of a retro filter for photos, and now it's more of a way to connect people. So brands can actually change too, or they can actually become enriched based on a foundational aspect of why they came to life in the beginning. So anyway, not to get too deep, but I love that stuff. I try to infuse that in my magic, and even my newest book, which is called En Route. But I touch on that a little bit in a way that I think is understandable and engaging, not like you're reading a business book.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really awesome and valuable, because one of the things that I think magicians worry so little about is, being audience first and thinking about, what you are and who you're doing it for, and like stepping right out there and saying, like, your brand is important. Like I've mentioned this on the podcast, but I was putting together a website a couple years ago, and I was asking for some advice from different people, and my brother said to me, and I love him with all my heart, but he said to me, what about the idea all-purpose magician? And I went, well, first of all, I'm not baking goods, but second of all, like, isn't that the exact opposite of what I want to do? I want people to find me and think this is exactly the guy that I want for me because he's XYZ, not, oh, thank God that he can do everything because that was what I wanted. So I think it's a breath of fresh air to be talking about, your branding, who you are, maybe your audience, and what you're trying to stand for yourself. A lot of times that process seems difficult. Like, it seems really hard to sit down and like look at yourself and be like, who am I? Like, what do I do? What is my magic like? Do you have any processes or ideas to help people go through that process?
A couple thoughts. Yeah, maybe just go to what you know. Maybe make a list of the routines that you like the best, and maybe the ones that maybe make another list of ones that you don't like for whatever reason. So look at that list of routines that you do like doing on a regular basis, and then kind of ask yourself why. Like, what do they have in common? Are they all like really interactive? Are they all more fun or more mysterious, or maybe there's a few groups, maybe group them. And okay, these tricks, these are all about audience engagement because I'm really into getting a crowd laughing and having fun. Or maybe these tricks are, I really like doing things on the table, very mysterious, very slow. I don't know, but you can go through that thought. But that could help be a good launching pad into, having an introspective look of why and how you approach magic. And from that point on, you can kind of come up with some other adjectives that maybe describe your work. That's a good start, I would say.
I think a lot of it seems like it's just, the process is important, but I feel like a lot of it is just reminding yourself and deciding to actually put pen to paper about things, whether it means categorizing all of your effects, or whether it means trying to come up with adjectives, or whether it means just buckling down and doing something active about helping that self-discovery process is, I think, going to mean the world compared to the guy who just continues to learn a trick and do it and not really even be mindful about why and how it is reflective.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I think a lot of people innately know this stuff. They just don't. They're never asked or encouraged to put pen to paper in that way. So if I could help spark that, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think that it's an awesome thing to spread into the magic community. Like, the more that magicians can help find their own identities and find what is creative about what they do and what helps make them tick, like, the more creative magic will be. The more we'll be producing different and better, interesting material and concepts instead of more people doing the exact same thing.
So, John, let me ask you. So, did you do the napkin approach thing in one degree, or did you start doing it?
at the time I didn't, but I'm actually going through a very similar process right now where I have highlighted 3 different things that are valuable in my magic, that I'm trying to help exemplify. So
you want to share one of them? I'm just curious.
Yeah, so the one that I'm trying to do is I want my premises to be active. So, like, I don't like telling stories about things in the past and demonstrating them with my magic, or telling a principle and using my magic to explain it. I want the actual action, to be happening live. So maybe whether it means I make a mistake or something unexpected happens, or we have to do something together, me and an audience, or whatever it is, the conflict is live and it's not a story of a conflict.
I love it.
What I mean?
Yeah, I totally get it. You're in the now.
Which is why I was such a big fan of in 1 Degree, the behind the back triumph. What's it called? It's not behind.
Yeah, that's
it called
it.
Behind the back. Yeah. Just because it's not you claiming that you're doing something or telling a story of something else. Just this thing unfolds and it's at the hands of other people, and it's active. The conflict is active. So I'm a big fan. I know we were talking about my things, but I love that trick.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I heard that Jonah just showed you recently.
Moments ago.
Yeah. So one of the things, now that we're talking about sort of presentations, you have some very, very creative presentations for your effect. And obviously it seems like, a lot of them are about advertising and things like that. So it obviously feels like you're drawing them from your life experiences, which is great. How can somebody help come up with their own premises and ideas for their magic?
Ooh, that's a big question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I can really...
Even just some starting steps, maybe.
Right. Well, okay, one thing is, obviously a presentation is just not announcing what you're doing. I think Greg Wilson talked a lot about this in his lectures, or even just chatting with them. Like, there's so many magicians who their presentation just saying, okay, I'm going to turn over the card, I'm going to turn it over, I'm going to put it in the middle of the deck, and that's their presentation. So don't do that. Sometimes I guess it's okay if you really want to highlight a moment to, like, there are only 4 cards, or what, want to highlight something, but don't continue that throughout the entire routine. Okay, so if it's not that, what else would it be? And sometimes I guess it's okay not to say anything. It's okay to have some gaps of silence. But like, what is... in 1 Degree, I do talk about what is it that you want the audience to feel at the end of your routine. And if you start from that, you can kind of go back. I guess I'll add one other idea. Sometimes I don't know until after I've kind of played around with a method, and then in that kind of, so like Lost and Found, for example, it uses a clear plastic sleeve. It's based on a Roy Walton effect called Jefferson's Jest, and then I read in a Peter Duffy book, he featured another version of that effect. It uses a clear sleeve. Both his take on it, I think Steve Hamilton and a few others. So anyway, but all of them had a card vanish from a clear sleeve, and I thought, wow, that's cool. Like what if I could make it come back? And so ultimately, I came up with a way to have a card vanish and then reappear back inside, with some 1 Degree changes along the way. But in my effort to add meaning to this, like, what is this clear sleeve to begin with? Why do I have it? So I thought, oh, what does it look like? A credit card holder, yeah. A luggage tag, oh, that's cool. So the idea of a luggage tag and a card traveling and coming back. So it kind of came from that. So the presentation became about traveling. Then I realized, okay, how can I really connect with an audience on this? I think everybody could relate either to the fear or the actual occurrence of having their luggage lost, right? So I talked about that, and then boom. So there was my presentation. So I think in anything you can just step back for a minute, and just like you're looking at a painting, and kind of look at this and, okay, what ideas does it conjure up, and go from there.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that brings to mind. And first of all, I think that's a really helpful approach, because one of the ways that you came at it, which I really like, is you were playing with this idea, with this prop, before you had settled on exactly why it resonates or what way you found to relate this. And I think that is more realistically the way that we come up with great premises for our magic. Sometimes we we go the other way and we say, what would be what people are really relating to luggage tags right now. How can I do magic with that? You know? But then a lot of the times it goes this way, and it's like, I have this amazing tool that excites me, that interests me. I've been playing with ideas and working with it. How can I get other people to get excited about what's going on here?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's all about.
And I think it allows us to enjoy magic without having like a presentation in mind when we enjoy it. You know what I mean? You didn't necessarily have to have a reason why you liked that clear plastic sleeve, you know? It only eventually all the ends came together when you found a great presentation that relates to the physical premise.
Yeah, that's right. It's just, don't force yourself. There's no rules in kind of playing around with magic that you have to have everything solved in a day. So, like you said, I mean, really, I think you just said it. Enjoy it. Enjoy the process of it. Enjoy performing it, and ultimately you have to enjoy it. And then you ask yourself, why? Mm-hmm. What are the things I enjoy most? And again, that's another peek into your brand.
Yeah. What about if somebody thinks that they're experiencing what one would call writer's block? You know, they're trying to come up with what's interesting about what they do, and they just seem to be hitting a wall. Would you say put it down, or would you say get out there and keep doing it and find a way to make it relate?
Yeah, both. But both of them. Sometimes it's like, if it's not happening, just, put it on the back burner. Open your mind. Sometimes inspiration comes from unexpected things. It could be something completely unrelated, a show on TV or whatever. There's a new trick that I'm going to be filming as a download with Vanishing Ink when I'm up in Blackpool. I'll just say that there's 4 moments in this trick, and 3 of them I believe I had solved. The 4th one I thought I had solved. But again, this came about just showing some buddies. We had like a Monday night kind of gathering that I try to make every once in a while. And I was showing it, and then it turned into a kind of some session time, and I realized, oh my God, this 4th moment actually became much better. Like, that's it. It was like, oh my, that feeling, like, oh my God, that's it. So and you'll see it in all its glory. I guess that's all I'll really say about it right now. But that came about by just I thought it was done, really, and then it was like I kept playing with it, and I realized, okay, no, I had an opportunity to make the ending even stronger, which I think is important in a routine such as this, where things are happening, where there's different moments, and then you want the final moment to be, okay, this is definitively the end of this routine. So
yeah, I think there's a line you need to walk where you have to stay true to what you want your effect to be during your creative process, but you definitely need to be open to other people's input, and not just in terms of method, but in terms of premise and framing and what everything in the end means. But one thing that I found super, poignant about what you're saying is stepping back, because so many times I'll have this sort of boxed in little ideas to what I'm trying to achieve, and that just, it stifles your creative potential outside of, allowing yourself to see what is outside of the box. You know what I mean?
That's true. And kudos to you. I think that takes a lot of maturity on our part to be able to, seriously, to not just think things are done, and to be open to input. So with that too, I think as magicians, we could be proactive in that. So don't surround ourselves with people. Don't have a mutual admiration society. You want people to challenge you. You want people to say, "Hey, that sucks," or "Here, have you considered this?" And I'll be honest. Sometimes it's really gratifying sometimes to come up with an idea of your own. But if it infuses an idea of somebody else, it's like, oh man, and it makes the effect better. Like, absolutely, be open to it, and also just be open to. Maybe some things aren't as great as we think they are sometimes too. But also be aware of, there may be somebody who doesn't like, or maybe a fellow magician doesn't like one aspect of an effect, for example. But that's because their brand's different. So also you have to discern what is valuable input and what's not. But yeah, be open to it all for sure.
Yeah, I think that one of the topics that we touched on when we were talking to Matthew Beesh a little while ago is he said, you know, you have to think about why you're creating what you're creating. And if you're doing it because you want to release it for some reason, then yeah, it really matters if it's yours or if it's not. But if you're doing it because you're trying to solve a problem in your magic, because you came up with something that either a friend came up with or Vernon came up with 50 years ago or whatever the case may be, that should give you a pat on the back that you're on the right track. And that's it. You don't need to be... you don't need to double down on all of your ideas. You know, if someone else created one that's better, then using that might be the best option.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, right. And some things it's just a combination of a lot of different ideas, you know? So, yeah.
He said that, not only should you not be, discouraged by, creating something that's already been created, but you should be encouraged by it because that means you're in the same mindset as some of the greatest thinkers in magic
Absolutely.
At the whatever time.
Great minds, right? That's a beautiful moment too, for sure.
So one of the things that you chat about in a section of the book which resonated with me is, I know obviously this book is like a couple years old. I'm talking about it like it's really new, but it's just funny because I'm able to chat with you about some of this content, but you were chatting about obviously expressing some of those things that you came up with in your napkin approach, in the discovery of yourself, expressing those things in your opening thoughts, opening words, opening ideas, and things like that. I find that the time that I struggle most in my magic preparation and scripting and stuff like that is when I have to start with a blank paper. You're looking at that like Microsoft Word or Pages, you're looking at that flashing blank space key, and you're like, what do I write? What'll fill this? So how do you get started on creating maybe an intro or some way to express to your audience the characteristics that you have of yourself? Because obviously you're not just saying them, you have to be them. Mm-hmm. So how do you start fresh?
Oh, wow. Yeah, good question. Well, sometimes I just don't start fresh. I'm continually jotting down notes, by the way, like all the time. So this idea
that might very well be the answer, right? Is trying not to start fresh.
I just find a good notes app. I've been using several, like Evernote or just scribbling, one that you can actually scribble with your finger. But ultimately, I found the Apple Notes to be really cool because it syncs with my Mac. And I just created different folders. So I have, magic ideas, just ideas that I might come up with. I just put them down so I don't forget. Or full-fledged magic effects, where I take the time to kind of write it out. Just tapping with my thumbs to type it up, but just getting enough of a description of it. But also magic learned folder, where if I find a trick that someone shows me, I love it, I'll put it down. Then I also have one just called, I think, patter ideas. Another one just called like tips, like just things that it's not a trick in of itself, but something that maybe makes the presentation stronger. So yeah, come up with some categories and just jot down notes and stuff. So, and then
already that's like wildly valuable,
Cool. Awesome.
Because it's an active approach to doing your magic. It's not you saying like, okay, well, next time I learn a trick, I'll do it, whatever. It's you necessarily being open to the world around you, being open to things that come up as ideas for patter, being open to, other things that you've seen other magicians do, being open to changes in the way that you perform, like just accepting the things that are coming at you and writing down the ones that inspire you. And how many times has it happened to, I know me, but I'm sure to people listening, where you've been working with an idea and you came up with something really fun, and then a couple days later you're like, what was that thing? It's done. It's gone.
It's maybe
you'll strike it again if by chance, but it's gone. And making sure that you have something in place where you've given yourself categories and really you've brought it to the front of mind to the fact that, taking note of these things are important so that I don't forget them and so that I have a database to draw on when I need it, so that I don't have to start staring at a blank page. I've got folders and folders full of pages and ideas from wildly different sources that all set me off on every time I read one of them, my brain gets lost in a tunnel of ideas that I remember.
And it might not even be the same idea that you wrote down. That happens to me a lot. I honestly don't take as many notes as I should, but when I do, sometimes I'll open them up and I'll read them and be like, what the fuck was I thinking when I wrote this down? And then I'll challenge myself and I'll think about it from the other side, and then it's a whole new train of thought to be on.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's funny. Sometimes, you look back like you just said, what the hell was I thinking?
What was I thinking?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. That's funny.
But what's cool is what this approach sort of does, and what all of these different nuggets of advice do, is instead of spending hours and hours and hours studying other people's presentations and material, which is wildly important. You need to get your grounding in magic and stuff like that, but spending the hours taking notes for yourself on what inspires you, and taking and diving deep into the stuff that you enjoy about magic, and making all of your, or many of your, research hours introspective, you're going to be able to produce something original and interesting, instead of being able to just be able to do other people's stuff as well as they can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, in my follow-up book to One Degree, One Degree was that's a 140 page.
Yeah, it's a
hard book, right? But in a booklet, I would say probably about half the size of Discoveries and Deceptions at a follow-up book. Again, a lot of card routines that still, I think, embody the type of magic that I like. But also a couple additional things I think that kind of good way to supplement that introspective look that I started with in One Degree. And anyway, in Discoveries and Deceptions, I talk about every day. Let me just try to keep a discovery library. So every day, just jot down something you learned that day, and it doesn't have to be magic. It could be something. Hey, I read something cool on Google today. I didn't know this statistic, but it's kind of neat just to be open to discovering something new. And so that's one idea I have in there. And then another idea in that book as well, I talk about the question, what did you learn? And oftentimes we, after every performance, write down, what did I learn? And for me, that's an interesting question, because sometimes I'm actually doing the teaching. I might be doing a lecture, but asking myself, what did I learn through the process of showing something to someone in an instructive way? Like, oh, that's one way to do it. So, and then if I could just add, so in the newest book, which is called En Route, I have a few more thoughts on that. I also talk more about brand, but I talk about brand voice. And that's something, in general lay audience stuff, in terms of marketing, you don't necessarily hear that. But brand voice is a term we use a lot in marketing. It's like, if your brand, if your logo was a living, breathing thing, how would it act? What would it say? What would it do? Like those things. And I give a few examples of real life brands, but I ask you to think of, again, 5 words that describe your brand voice and the way you actually express your brand. There are a few other essays in there, a lot about like, what does success look like? Because that really gets you, and I'm not talking about success in terms of, income or fame. I'm talking about, what does success look like? Are you achieving the very goal that you set out to do? And how do you know if you do or not? So anyway, I have a few more essays in the new book called En Route. But I also have like 10 new card routines, which is always fun for me to show.
Wow. I think that's huge. And I think, I really like the highlighting of the success. And one of the reasons is because, like we mentioned earlier, there are no rules to magic. There's no process that everybody follows. There are schools of sorts, but almost everyone I've ever met who's ever done magic has learned it independently, which means that we're not all reaching to get to the same place. We are very much reaching to get to very different places. Some people want to be magic creators. Other people want to be performers. Other people want it to be a side thing that can help them make the money on weekends. Other people just want to do it for their friends, right? And getting a good understanding of that, I think, will really help get on point to decide whether you're successful, right? And sometimes it's easier than you think to get the goals that you want out of out of the processes. That's something that I think about it, because when you double down on exactly what you want, it ends up being easier to get. You end up finding out that the path there is not as convoluted as you once thought.
Yeah.
I find.
Yeah, and you could learn a lot about, asking other magicians what they do. Like the same questions we're talking about now, to ask others, that could be some good session time beyond just, sleight of hand and everything. That's why I'd asked you, like, what was one of the 3 things you came up with? And I was at the castle recently, and I was talking to Paul Vigil. He was visiting from Vegas. He brought Johnny Thompson down to do a special night of close-up that night. And Paul's a great guy. I've met him a few times, and we had a good chance to talk more. But he gave an interesting approach, and I was totally like just really got me thinking, because you were talking about behind the back triumph and how that is, it's not a magic effect per se. It's presented as a serendipitous event where, like, the audience is somehow unshuffling a deck of cards, or you had nothing to do with it. And I actually have an effect in the new book too, which is an ace production, where 2 spectators find 4 aces when you never touch the deck. The magic's in their hands, and he said, that's cool. He said, but for me, I do the exact opposite. I want them to know that I have a hand in this. I want them to know that it is because of me that this magic happened, because otherwise, why am I there? What do they need me for? I'm like, oh my God, wow. Oh my God, am I wrong in my approach? But I realized, no, that's his approach, and that's his brand. And I think, and it's okay, but it was really interesting to hear that from somebody else, go ahead. Yeah. And I was going to say, I'm not touting in my magic that magic in the spectator's hands is the be-all, end-all. Like, it should happen all the time. I think I have a few effects that I explore that, because I personally, I still like the idea of, participants being part of the magic and having that feeling like, wow, I just made something impossible happen. And, maybe in life there's an overarching focus that maybe achieving the impossible is in fact possible sometimes. So I have kind of a broader view of it. But anyway, I thought that was really great to hear from Paul, and I thought I'd share that with the group, because it just adds to the understanding of magic, and looking at it through the lens of other magicians is always a great learning experience.
Absolutely. And I find, as crazy as this sounds, but often, and here, I'll name drop the book because it's perfect, but one sentence, like one idea, here it is, degree, but really though, like one thing that another magician says to you, an idea that's presented in a book or in a video or something like that, something that you read, something that can change the way that you do everything. You can read a sentence or a paragraph and you can go, wow, I've been doing it wrong the whole time. Or even if it's not that, you're saying like, wow, I've never thought of it that way. Oh my goodness, ever. Kind of like the moment that you described with Paul. And I think that it's so important to seek out moments in life, but in magic, where you're confronted with information that's very new to you. When it's maybe not necessarily about the method, it's about performance ideas and these questions that we don't ask ourselves. Like, is every magician buckling down and saying, like, who do I really want doing the magic here? What does the audience really think is the source of the impossibility going on? And I don't think they do. So I think that getting the, just I think people thinking about interesting subjects like this.
I think the key is to think about it and listen to it, not to argue it, not to have to decide whether it's right or wrong. You know what I mean? Like, it's just other people's ideas can be other people's ideas, and they can float around in the back of your mind until they mean something to you personally. You know what I mean? They don't have to be like, okay, you're right, I have to take the cards out of the spectator's hands, or like, okay, you're right, I have to use normal decks of cards and no fancy ones and do no flourishes because it has to look all natural or whatever. Like, they're all different ideas and different approaches, and you can really take your own approach to it because it's an art, and that's what it's about.
Absolutely. And I think, wow, this is really refreshing. I've done a few podcasts in the past, but I don't think we've ever talked about this sort of approach so much. So I hope, I hope the listeners also find it valuable. I certainly do.
I hope so too.
Yeah.
They might have, we're getting really, really deep right now. They might, but ultimately, I would say that the foundation, everything we're talking about, just play to your strengths. Understanding what those things you do well. I mean, there's some magicians who doing a kind of a hands-off effect, it maybe doesn't play well in their hands because that's really going to, maybe their hands are really their strongest point, in terms of being artistic and how they present magic. So, but if you're having the audience partake in something interactive, then you really got to focus on presentation and engagement and clarity and all that stuff. So, but whatever it is that you do best, focus on that. And like for me, I know that like doing cardistry stuff, that's not, I can't do it. I do a few maybe understated things, but yeah. So yeah, come up like back to the thing I guess we talked about in the beginning, full circle here, is that those three priorities, those three things that really define your brand, and play, like you said, I think double down on those, and it goes from there. But ultimately, it's about the magic experience for the audience. And I tell you, out of all the things we're talking about, it's really the creative aspect of creating magic and the performance part of magic that I just really love the most. That's really what it's all about.
Absolutely. It's the fun of it all, like if any part of magic is giving you stress, you probably don't have to do that part of magic. Again, there's no rules, there's no laws. If you really like creating but you hate performing, I promise you there's a magician who's going to want your help creating magic. If you love performing and you love creating new presentations, but you don't feel that you've got the brain to come up with a new ingenious method,
someone hates performing.
That's okay.
Yeah.
There's methods out there already. You can just use a method and come up with your clever performance. You know what I mean? Like, there really are no rules. So doubling down on your strengths, finding what interests you and what compels you, and more than anything, keeping a log of this information, taking these notes, like recording it and asking yourself these questions are the things that are going to compel you forward. And I want to thank you for saying what you just said about the podcast. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because the whole point of this podcast is to not talk about method, because I find that there's enough of that, and magicians, we all get together and then we talk about where to put our pinkies and no one's talking about this. Right? Yeah. So I'm always happy to talk about this. And if you're listening at home, you want to send me an email, you want to talk about something, send me an email. This is why we're doing this, right? Because we're trying to put these conversations into the world. So thank you for taking part in this, and also for producing and producing content, a book, multiple books, where it's not all about the tricks. It is a lot about the tricks, and they're awesome tricks, so I'm happy that you're putting them out. But I'm always thankful for magicians who help push out the theory aspect, and talk about things like performance and business and selling yourself and everything like that, because I think that part of the stuff that helps move the magic world around.
Yeah. Let me add one final thing to that too. It's funny because the magic that we enjoy performing and creating, if that's what you do or whatever, is a really it's a good lens into our priority and our brand and magic. But the same thing goes with theory. So the things that we talk about, there's a spectrum of things you can talk about in theory. Mine just happens to be primarily through a business lens, because that's me. And when I first wrote One Degree, and it was one of the earlier drafts, and on that essay, which I call the Napkin Approach, Joshua J., who was helping to edit the book, said, you expand more. Like, why should I care? Why should I trust you to talk about this? So expand more a little bit on your business background. And I think that's important too, because we could talk about whatever you want to categorize what we're talking about today, like theory or learning or everything. But again, those should also come from your strengths. So think about you don't always have to be an expert to talk about this stuff, but on those things that you really do like to focus on more, again, ask yourself, why is that? And what background do you have in that? And there's a lot of books on theory. I mean, like even just like Darwin Ortiz, Strong Magic, and there's others as well.
Game changer. Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, do I even have anything to add to that? And I thought, well, I guess I do, because it's coming from a very authentic place. And I do have over 2 decades of experience in marketing and advertising and PR and fundraising, and a lot of those things do feed into my aspect on my lens of theory. So I thought I'd add to that because we're talking a lot about this, and so I guess I'd sum it up by saying, hey, why is it that some of these aspects of theory resonate with you and others don't? And those things that you really liked, or those things that you actually have something to say, where does that come from, and why should we care?
And I think that is really important, because it's not just about writing down things and picking them, but it's about picking the things that really are true to you, And nowadays it's hard to define the difference between what you want and what you are. A lot of times you see other magicians doing stuff and you're like, oh, that's kind of like what I'm doing, and then you try to emulate that, and you try to say that you're that type of performer when really that might not be true. And you might be fitting a square peg in a round hole or whatever, and trying to find those ways to be true to yourself. And whether it means looking through the depths of your other hobbies, or looking through the parts of magic that resonate with you, or whatever it is, just finding out why it is that you like what you like, and not being afraid to do something special or different or unique. And wherever that special part comes in for you, whether it's your performance or your ingenious methods or your ability to connect with people differently, or whatever it is, doubling down on that. So I think that is very, very valuable.
I like I don't know if this is the right way to phrase it, but it's interesting to me that there's a very sort of fine line you have to walk, where you're sort of like, I want to stay true to myself, but I only want to do so with purpose. Like, you don't want to shut yourself off from other ideas just because you want to be different. You know what I mean? Like, there has to be, you have to think, this is how I am different, and here's why it's important. Right? Like, this is why I'm going to stand my ground on this. But at the same time, you don't want to be a stubborn, artist, learner, co-magician. You know what I mean? You don't want to be too stubborn. You want to open yourself up without losing your sense of self and identity as a magician.
That's a great point. Yeah, thanks, Tyler, for bringing that up.
Yeah, it's a fine line between finding yourself and capturing the things about the world that intrigue you.
Yeah.
So sort of that looking inwards and looking outwards for connection.
That's what it's about. Awesome.
Yeah. Well, there you go. One of the things that we do when we wrap up the episode is we each go around and we mention something from the episode that we thought was a take-home point, something that we thought was maybe particularly important, or at the very least, got our brains excited, and that we think people should resonate on and sit on. For me, I love, and I have loved before, the Napkin Approach. I think more than anything, it's just a simple way to start putting who you are down on paper. And I think that it's an activity that the magicians don't always do. It's very difficult to find out who you are, and taking away the stress of saying, like, write out who you are, and saying, you can draw images, come up with whatever, it will change over time. It can change. Just put down who you feel that you are. I think that's wildly important, and I can't imagine that anybody doing that activity will not find at least some benefit out of it and no negative. Like, it could only be a great, awesome thing for someone to do. So that is my take-home point. I think everybody should write down, do a napkin approach and see what they can do. Tyler, what about you? What did you think was a particularly take-home piece of information?
Kind of the same thing, but more so with the smartphone apps. I think, like, it's something I have ADD, so I get moments of inspiration that are very intense and fleeting. So I like the idea of, capitalizing on a moment when it's there. And we live in a day and age where you're always prepared to take a voice memo or write down any idea that you have and validate it at a later point. You don't need to fixate on something forever. You can just get it out there, make sure it exists, and then come back to it with a new set of eyes, at any point in the future.
And you, John, is there anything that we said or you said from this episode that you think is of particular importance for magicians listening?
Yeah, well, I'll just say, I think for you, Jonah, your point, one of your three things you shared about being active, you don't want to tell stories of things that happened in the past. You want it to be in the now, basically. And I just love the way you put that. So I just love hearing stuff like that. And I think that was kind of a fresh perspective to hear. And then Tyler, your point that you just made about, you have to have a sense of purpose and define who you are, but don't let that limit you to being open to hearing other things. You don't have to necessarily take everything you hear, but certainly hearing it and seeing how that might enrich your brand and your approach is valuable. So I like both of those things, and I will say that this is probably good timing for me. I'm going to Blackpool on Wednesday. I'll be there through. I'm coming back on Monday. I'll be lecturing, my first time lecturing at Blackpool, which is the largest magic gathering in the world.
How many days is the convention? 3?
I believe, it's Thursday through Sunday, so it's 4 days actually. Yeah.
I actually believe, I'm not sure, but I think this episode might be coming out on the Thursday. So while you're there, you'll be able to tell people, hey, we just spoke about this.
That's awesome. Well, you'll know this, Jonah, that I think you had asked me if I could do the podcast, and my initial thing was, I'm so busy. I'm finishing writing up my column for Genie, which I just submitted yesterday. I have to start packing for Blackpool. Like, I just don't know if I have the time. And then you had mentioned, oh man, like we have this topic that was just perfect for you. And I said, well, let's just do it. And I'm so glad I did. And I saw one final takeaway is like, challenge yourself. I was listening to a TED Talk by Shonda Rhimes. She's a writer and producer, and shows I didn't necessarily watch, like Scandal and Grey's Anatomy, but her podcast was about the year of yes, where she said, you know what, I realized I was doing so much, but I didn't have so much time to spend with my kids or to do this and do that. And I said, I'm going to say yes to everything. If my kids say, Mom, I want to do something this weekend, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. And so that year of yes thing was something that I think I took on, like, wow, sometimes you think there's no way I can take on so much. People often ask me, like, wow, you have a day job in marketing, you have a family and magic, and then you decided to say yes to writing for Genie and doing a new book at the same time you're going to Blackpool. It's like, but sometimes when you say yes to a lot of things, they don't necessarily, they're not all mutually exclusive. Sometimes they enrich each other. And I'd say, like, when I'm doing all these things at the same time, there's a lot of great synergy that comes out of it. So I guess my final takeaway is that about everything we've talked about is, if an opportunity comes your way and your gut instinct to say, wow, I don't have the time, maybe reverse that thought. Say, you know what, I'm going to take it on. Let's just see what happens. Because I think the results will be surprisingly positive.
Absolutely. And there's a famous Bill Gates quote where he says, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. And I think that it's totally true. There's an idea called Parkinson's Law, which says that the amount of time you give, or the amount of like space you give a task, will grow to fit it. So for example, if you remember back to high school or whatever, when you had 3 weeks to do an essay, it took you 3 weeks to do an essay. But if you had 1 week to do the essay, somehow you did it in 1 week. And I think that that's something that we can all think about. We think that we're too busy, but all of a sudden we add something to our life, and instead we just get more efficient at doing all of the other things, because it now all needs to fit. It's like a new puzzle that we can make time for. And if it means that we don't need to watch a full season of House of Cards, then that's what it means. And I think that you get a lot of benefit from being introspective and saying yes and taking on fun and exciting projects. So I think that was a great last piece of advice. And the last thing I'll say is, where can people find you, and where can people find your new book?
Great. Yeah, thank you. And by the way, I learned something new. I hadn't heard of that. Parkinson's Law? Is that what it's called?
Parkinson's Law, yeah.
Okay, cool. I learned something new. And I also learned that Bill Gates said what I was trying to say in like 10 words. So there's a way to say it more succinctly. So anyway, thank you. I love it. It's absolutely true. People can find me on my website, which is magicjohng.com. And they could learn they could find my links on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but they could also go to the products page to learn about my new book, which is called En Route. Real quick, it's 84 pages. It's available as a softcover and a PDF if that's what you like. 10 new routines, a few essays based on the things we talked about today. It's going to be debuting at Blackpool. so they get first dibs at it. But when I get back, and they give me a little bit of time to get ready, but people can pre-order it now if they want on my website. And yeah, but there's all kinds of other stuff on my site in terms of what's going on, and I guess just in terms, you'll see on my website how I express my brand to the outside world. This is my website primarily for lay audiences and stuff like that. So, but there's also a page for magicians if they want. I have no problem having a products page because it's just speaks to my kind of expertise and my experience in magic.
Yeah. What are they gonna do? Your business client's gonna hire you and then secretly learn how to do a triumph routine?
Well, my audience, my audience are both magicians and lay audiences, and I've had other clients who have hired me who had no idea that I wrote for a magic magazine or that I wrote a lecture on the art of magic. Like, I think it actually
people don't know that there's such things as magic conventions in Blackpool where thousands of magicians get together to do card tricks, right? So
to me, that's a little bit more credence. The whole thing about doing genie, for example, it's like just positions me more in the literary realm of magic.
Yeah.
As opposed to my uncle Hank in Vegas. Last time I visited him, he's like, "Hey, show me one of your jokes."
Yeah.
You like a magic trick? Like, one of my jokes. It seems it's really cute though. But sometimes people's view of magic is very minimal, or it is very like a clown, or like their view of magic is theirs. And ultimately, it's okay though, because, and again, this is true in marketing and it's true in magic. Meet people where they are, and
absolutely,
it's kind of another piece of advice.
It's in our job descriptions to turn people's assumptions from magic into energy to help fuel what we're performing, right? Yeah. So if everyone thinks that for some reason you're going to produce a rabbit, well, you could not produce the rabbit, or you could produce the rabbit, and you can make a lot of people very, very happy because you knew that that's what they wanted. So I think there's a lot to understanding your audience. And once again, big, huge thank you. That was an awesome conversation. And of course, thank you for taking the time. I know you said you were really busy, but the theme of the month is crafting an effect. And I think that these are such important tools. And it's happened now time and time again where we've tried to talk about crafting an effect, and we've ended up talking about your character and identity and who you are as a whole performer, your entire shows, your goals, and it's crazy, but that's what it takes. That's what it takes to have an effect that is refined and quality and representative of you, and this whole entire thing without even talking about method.
Well, it's funny. Let me add, because effect is an interesting word, and I think we did talk about creating an effect, even though we didn't talk about an actual trick. Because think about the word effect. It's not necessarily what happens to the props. It's the effect that you want to have on the audience. You do that through a trick or a thing. So I think even though we didn't talk about specifically about method or structure or presentation, we did certainly talk about ways to enhance the effect that you want to have on your audience when performing. So I'm glad you brought up that point. So and it's been a great pleasure for me. Thank you guys. I enjoyed every minute of it. You guys are cool, and I like the questions you asked. And thank you for inviting me on your podcast.
I will use that sound clip forever.
Never, yeah.
And thank you so much. Hopefully you have a great time in Blackpool. And for those of you that were listening at home, once again, big, huge thank you for tuning in to the episode. I hope that you enjoyed it, and we will see you next Thursday.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, take care. Bye.
Well, there you have it. I hope that you liked episode 46.
I fucking hope you loved it.
I hope you loved it. Yeah.
I had a great time.
I did too.
I felt very validated.
Yeah.
He was very good.
He was very nice.
He was so kind.
What a nice fellow.
Yeah.
If you liked the episode and you feel like telling the world, don't hold back, I think. Yeah. I think you should share it just for kicks, just for a change of pace this time.
And if you didn't like the episode, keep your
hold back,
opinions to yourself.
Yeah, you should
Nobody
hold
cares
back.
about what you think. Yeah. It's not worth it.
People really only care what you think if it's you
positive.
saying that you like it,
yeah.
right? So on that note, if you are interested in these books, check out 1 Degree. I am a huge, huge fan of that book. And of course, check out his new book, En Route. I think you're going to like some of his ideas, especially if you liked the ideas in this episode. But what do I know? I haven't read the book either. It's just on pre-order right now. So I will be reading it for the first time, just like you guys are. But I know I will be picking up a copy. And there you go. There you have it. All the good stuff, all the fun stuff. We will see you on episode 47. Yeah, it didn't rhyme, but it still worked.
It worked, yeah.
It still worked.
Shout out to people in Blackpool.
Yeah, there's people in Blackpool right now at that convention. Pretty hefty convention. And John is there.
Yeah.
So if you are in the small Venn diagram of people who both listen to this podcast and are in Blackpool, you should say hi to John. Or send us a message and say hi. We won't be there.
We'll shout you out. We'll even do it.
Yeah, hey, you know what? If you just send me a message about anything even tangentially related, I could probably shout you out. Yeah. So that could be fun. Or you know what?
Actually, you know what? Shout out to Neil Patrick Harris.
Yeah.
He's been emailing us like crazy.
Yeah.
Tons of ideas about what we're talking about.
So he'll be on, I think, next week?
Yeah,
next week.
47?
Neil will be on. Yeah. Neil. So you can get pumped up for Patrick Harris. But otherwise, we will see you next week.
Take care, everyone.